In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, I'm bold to bring you this word today. Amen. So that good things come to those who wait, I took that on board. I clung to that. That was my favorite, because it meant I didn't have to do anything. I could wait. Good things come to those who wait, said grandmothers and aunts and uncles, people who didn't want to give me stuff right now. So I took it on. That was me. I was the king of procrastination because good things were coming. Delay became my delight. And so I became very familiar with a question that would come from family members, colleagues, mentors, friends, those who had other ideas and other ambitions for me. Their question: what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? This was most noticeable in the decades of foot dragging that I engaged in prior to my return to school. My procrastination techniques became legend. And as we considered it together, Lee and I realized that it was much like being on a teeter-totter for the two of us. My enthusiasm was always met with her caution. And then in a few months it would reverse and she would be ready to go and I would not. It took a long time to balance out that particular ride. And all the while someone was bound to ask, "What are you waiting for?" One person in particular, God bless him, never gave up asking that question, and it is to him I credit my current situation. What was I waiting for? I was waiting, well, you name it. I was waiting for support. I was waiting for money. I was waiting for a different kind of encouragement. I was waiting for somebody to pick me up and put me in the pool, to use the line from John's Gospel. And I was content to wait because I was sure that in time all would be revealed because, good things come to those who wait. And they did. It was, sort of, eventually. But not because I waited. And yet waiting seems to tie our scriptures together this morning, at least in my mind. On the one hand, we have John in his exile on Patmos, waiting for the world to be changed by the grace of God. And while he waits, John writes in a kind of code that is meant to convey hope to Christians living with the harsh realities of an oppressive regime and a seemingly endless series of personal and corporate disasters. Now, too many in the Christian church have turned John's powerful message of hope into what they would call prophecy. They are firm believers in the mantra that God's things come to those who wait. But John wasn't predicting anything. I'll say that again because many of us need to hear it. The revelation to John is not a series of predictions. It is not. John was living this. He and his fellow Christians were living what he's describing. And he's describing it in code so they'll know where to find the good stuff. His revelation is offered to remind us that even when we wait on the one whose love and mercy changes everything. city of gold, crystal fountains, pearly gates, jasper walls, an image of promise and delight in which none need be afraid. Doesn't that sound like something worth waiting for? But it was the promise that held them through the bad times. It wasn't a prophecy of what the new life would look like. Chapter 21 of Revelation brings all of the misery into focus with hope. If you get all the way through Revelation, by the time you get to chapter 21, you'll know why it's so joyous and so hopeful and so vividly described. This is a place that John speaks of that is not divided into work and worship, where it's a place where to exist is to honor and glorify and worship God. There's no temple. There's no sanctuary needed. The whole place is a sanctuary. So the people who like to worship in nature, guess what? You can do that there. That's how it works. The sanctuary is the air, the rocks, the street, the trees. John speaks of a place where nothing unclean will be found. And he doesn't present this as an exclusive resort for the faithful. Nothing like that. Instead, this is a place where the good is so obvious, so palpable, that evil simply cannot exist. And that is what John and his audience are waiting and hoping and dreaming for, set hard against their reality. But you might well ask, if the visions of God's peaceful reign are so appealing, why wait? Why not just work for what you long for? Why not follow in the footsteps of Jesus? Follow the advice of the prophet Micah. Do justice, love kindness, walk humbly with God until peace and justice and love are the order of the day. Why not do that? Come on, John. Why you set us up with all these riddles and wild visions? Just do something. Well, they had been doing something, but for John and his generation, they were resigned to speaking longingly of waiting, because living out the promise of this beautiful vision of God's reality could get you arrested or killed. It was that simple. Because when the promise of God's order threatens to undo the power that others gained by force, or by politics, or by cruelty, or by stealth, then the people who embodied God's good order, people like Jesus and all of his disciples, those people must be stopped. They must be detained or denied or resisted or defeated or killed. So John's generation waited because they trusted God. They waited because the vision of that peaceful reign of God can sustain you in the absence of peace, even when you're working hard for it. Sometimes waiting is necessary. Sometimes the waiting is forced on us, like it was for John, like it was for that man beside the pool at the sheep gate, a man who was constrained by his illness, limited in his infirmity, who must wait for someone to put him in the waters because he can't make it himself. It was, a side note, important to get there first. The healing properties of the waters were only good at the beginning. Once the herd thunders into them and muddies them up, the healing is diluted. So you got to get there first, and he can't. He just can't. And since it's an everyone for themselves kind of atmosphere, when the waters are stirred up, nobody is going to say, hey, buddy, can I give you a hand? Can I get you there? Doesn't happen that way. And this fellow has no chance to help himself, no chance to bring justice or healing or anything like relief to himself. And he's been waiting for 38 years. That's not easy. What choice did he have? So he waits and he dreams and he wonders. And then, of course, a miracle. And of course, on the Sabbath, but that's a sermon for another day. Two very different stories of waiting. And the temptation for us is to read them and think, look at what God has promised to those who wait. Waiting is worthwhile. Golden cities, jasper walls, all of that, yay. Or we say, look what happens when you wait for Jesus. Miracles, healing, yay. But what are we waiting for? What is the 21st century church waiting for? 21 centuries of waiting on a promise, waiting on a golden city to descend out of heaven and fix all our problems. What are we waiting for? Are we really just waiting for Jesus to return? For Jesus to wander by us in our moment of need and remind us that the power to stand up and walk has always been within us? Did you notice that about this gospel story? Unlike some others, Jesus doesn't really do anything. He knows that there's a man in need. He says, don't you want to be well? And then he says, stand up and walk. And that's what happens. Is that what we're waiting for? For Jesus to come along and say, just do it. Just do it. Whatever it is you're thinking of, dreaming of, hoping for, just do it. Or maybe we're not that ambitious. Maybe we are the church of the end times. Maybe we are just waiting in dread for the end, so that the new thing that God has promised will soothe our battered souls and we can say, there you go, good things come to those who wait. It's a tempting thing. In this day and age, God knows it's a tempting thing to wait, because action is frustrating and everything seems too big for us to solve. But we're not asked to solve everything all at once, are we? We are called to do more than wait. And our lives, in this part of the world at least, are not forfeit if we choose to work for justice or offer mercy or try to live God's promises into reality. We are called to do more than wait. Standing up for the oppressed and speaking out against the kind of violent rhetoric that threatens to consume us is the very least we can do as the followers of Jesus in this day and age. And the world can't wait for us to act. More die every day. Was it 2 or 3 more mass shootings south of the border this week? At least one of which was decidedly motivated by the kind of hateful rhetoric that we don't even hear anymore because it's so prevalent. More die every day. More selfishness, more fearfulness, more power-mad people are taking the world away from us every day. And we wait. We wait. we can, and some in the church do say, we must wait, for these are the signs of the end. Have you heard that lately? I have, and not just lately. Every time. Do you remember the mad cow crisis? I think I've told this story before. I had a friend, a good friend, a faithful friend, whose daughter and son-in-law had a cattle farm in eastern Ontario, and the borders were closed and the markets were down and they couldn't sell a cow. And this dear woman said to me with a straight face, "It's just another one of the signs of the end times." Now, I don't remember reading about mad cow disease in Revelation, and I don't know if that's the right approach to all that's going on around us. Well, you know, these are the end times. I'll say it again. John was not predicting this in his revelation. John was living a version of it in his own time. The waiting that he did by way of imprisonment wasn't idle time, was it? He wrote a book. He wrote in code to the church at large to remind them what the promise was and to keep them hopeful and faithful and to tell them what the future could be. God has promised it, says John's revelation, and we must discover it rather than wait for it. Now, having said that, is there anything wrong with waiting? Not always. Anticipation is a wonderful state of being, even for big kids at Christmas or birthdays or ahead of holidays. How many of you are just so delighted to be eager to go somewhere again? Yeah, anticipation, not a bad thing. Are you going to have to wait till July? Yes, you are, Jeff. Is that okay? Yes, it is. Waiting isn't always a bad thing. In fact, I would defend my impulse to wait back in the day as what I took to calling thoughtful deliberation. Right? It's not procrastination, it's thoughtful deliberation. But eventually, I had to stop deliberating and act. I had to do something. The waiting and the wishing that I did for nigh on 15 years failed to make any change in my situation. They don't confer degrees in procrastination, apparently, but they're gonna, eventually. And when I decided to act, I learned eventually the lesson that the man at the sheep gate pool learned. That waiting can sometimes silence the voice of the Spirit's leading. The chance to get up and walk. The chance to reach out for justice and live in love. Turns out those are always open to us. The kingdom of God comes close when we step out in faith after the fashion of Jesus. The good things that I so patiently waited on were waiting in me to be activated. They were waiting for me to put myself in the Spirit's path. All of that waiting, all of that tension, apparently it goes in a number of ways, and it works its own kind of magic. Yes, we wait on God in faith and hope, absolutely. And God waits on us in patient love to get up and walk and speak and defend and praise and be joyful Even now, the waters are being stirred. Even now, that light that cannot be extinguished shines fiercely against the darkness. Even now, God's promise invites us to live and share and act and do. What are we waiting for?